Hey everybody, this is Jeff with the 10X Cande Experience podcast, founded in 2011 Talent Board, and the Candidate Experience Awards is the first nonprofit research organization focused on the elevation and promotion of a quality candidate experience. The Talent Board delivers annual recruiting and hiring industry benchmark research that highlights accountability, fairness, and the business impact of candidate experience. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest today. He's the president of the Talent Board. Please welcome Kevin Grossman. Kevin, welcome to the 10X Cande Experience Show.
Thanks, Jeff. How are you?
Fantastic. Now, before I hit record, we started having this conversation, and you were getting into how you used to do the Cande Awards and the Talent Board research, but you really weren't doing any kind of follow-up. Why don't you kind of continue that?
Well, it's really more about, it's early on in the early days of Talent Board. It was very volunteer driven. It was very labor of love. And it was, experimenting with survey research, asking some candidate ratings questions of the candidates. And companies would participate every year and they get their raw data, which they were very grateful for. And that we would let them know whether or not they won a Cande Award or not, based on having the highest ratings in our research every year. And we can talk more about how we do that in a bit if you want. But we didn't give them a lot of analysis. We just didn't have the bandwidth at the time, mostly volunteers, except for the co-founders, Elaine Orler, Jerry Crispin, and Ed Newman, who were just seeing if there was something there, right? If organizations would want to keep doing this. And then we eventually found out that they would. So when I was recruited to come on board to help kind of run and scale the Candies and help develop it further, we then started providing more analysis to the companies, because early on the companies also didn't cost anything. It was free to participate. Right. And now it's a small fee now. It's $500. It's a lot of value that they get. And we do, but we definitely spend more time now in an overview session. I mean, they get ongoing access to their data anyway in our partner platform, who is Surveil, who does candidate experience surveys. And that's our platform that we use. So they get access to the data. But yeah, we definitely go much more in depth, high level in depth, but that giving them feedback on what we see in the data. And now that we've been reading this data for well over 10 years now, and especially how we've matured over the past 6+ years has been, it's very beneficial to the companies that we work with and to us, because we've got, we're sitting on 1.25 million and growing candidate responses. And I know when you compare that to, the volume of applicants that some of the ATSs and other systems see, they might see that in a year, not 10 years, but this is the survey data that we're capturing. And so we're pretty proud of the research that we do every year. And we try to share more of it, of what we see and find.
And I'm not aware of any other as in-depth candidate research or candidate experience research data. I mean, you don't have any competitors per se, right? So.
It's a good question that you're asking. Not exactly. Although that may be changing in the future. And, we're a nonprofit education organization. We're not a for-profit. Right. So our goal is to evangelize, creating, elevating, and promoting a quality candidate experience. That's what our mission has always been. And we've never wavered from that. So, but there isn't anything that does independent research like we do, focused on recruiting, hiring, and candidate experience. Other research firms focus on recruiting, and they may touch on candidate experience, and it's great. Anything that does, we welcome it. There is an initiative that's been kind of growing in the Australian, New Zealand, and a little bit in the UK market now, called Circle Back. It's not benchmark research yet. It's really companies who are pledging to respond to every applicant, which I think is great. No, but I think it's great.
Right? Yeah.
And I welcome it. So I welcome any of those things, but nobody yet that still just does this kind of research that we do every year.
So the latest research report came out in September, right? And this is for the 2020 data?
The report's not out yet. The data we're doing the analysis now.
Okay.
The reports will be out at the end of the year, early next. That's the goal. But we're in the middle of reviewing the data. So the deadline for companies to participate was the end of August.
For 2021, but 2020.
For this year. Yeah.
Right,
So we have all the
2020
data. Correct. We have all the
Right.
data for this year, but the research reports for this year will come out at the end of the year. As of now, companies can still download any of our past library. It's just that
Gotcha.
the latest and greatest won't be done until the end of the year. But we're already knee deep in data and looking at anything that was different from the previous years that we've seen. What's new? I have to tell you, because I'm sure you're going to ask this question, what's new?
Well, not yet.
Okay, I'll wait for that, because I got a funny zinger for you when we get there. So
we're going to save that to the end, right?
All right. Anyway,
keep people hooked. So the latest research report I read was the 2020, and there was a section in there about measuring the impact of automation, chatbots, text message obviously is going, gangbusters. But video interviewing increased 129% in 2020. Why is that?
Well, think about it. Well, it's the
COVID, of course, right?
It's the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's so it wasn't trying to be deceiving. I mean, it literally, there were still, listen, we keep talking a lot about how, so many companies they did virtualize, they had to, a lot of interviews are being done, people working more remotely. That continues to be the case, but there's always people who have to be on site somewhere.
Yeah.
And not all organizations, but a good majority of them, whether they're in the office, in the plant, in the store. And COVID impact. Yeah. I mean, healthcare, for example, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so there was people and there was still some level of in-person screening and interviewing that was going on, but as for the majority of people, overall, everything was virtualized. And so, of course, that and even this year in our data, the majority of interviews that candidates told us in the data this year, it was all video. I mean, there were still in-person interviews happening, don't get me wrong, but it was all video. And we usually wouldn't have seen that, right? Because that's not the case in previous years, but we're not in a usual year again. Still, even now, even with frenetic hiring that's going on in companies that were decimated, and industries that are scrambling to come back, and then now you've got fewer applications. You've got your employees are quitting in droves, and you are struggling to fill racks and positions. Again, I'm generalizing because it's going to vary across industries and even regionally vary, but that's the reality. And at least in North America and in the States, some of that is washing over. I've talked to other regions where it is not so much in Latin America, at least not yet, in regards to a tight labor market.
Yeah.
But that could change. But now though, it's bonkersville still.
Yeah.
It really is.
And this has been coming even without the pandemic. This was coming no matter what, right? We've had a ton of baby boomers retiring, and that's the biggest cause. Pandemic added to it. 500,000 people, that were originally employed passed away now due to COVID. Now you've got another 200,000 or 300,000 that are displaced.
Sure.
And another 200,000 or 300,000 they estimate, just hate their job and they're not going back to whatever it was they were doing, and they want to find something new.
Yeah.
They just haven't found it yet, right? So that's a lot of people, but by and large, it has to do more with the people retiring than anything else, right? That's the biggest impact that I see in the data.
I mean, when you look, sure. I mean, I think it is, and I think it's and people who have left the workforce and aren't coming back.
Yeah.
Right. And you think about the sheer volume of women who have left the workforce
exactly
that have not come back yet because of childcare issues.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on. So it's complexity of all those things that are now. Anybody who's been in talent acquisition for 10, 15, 20 plus years has never seen this world before. In recruiting and hiring, I mean.
Yeah, getting back to the world. getting back to the video interviewing, one of the statistics that I found pretty interesting was that um, the number of candidates reporting a positive experience increased when they did this one specific thing. Do you remember what that was?
In the video interviewing?
Yeah. So if the
Um,
company did this one thing, it increased it went up to 51% of positive
is it about
experience.
providing the agenda ahead of time? Prepping,
Giving
prepping the
them a
candidate.
video preparing them
Yeah.
for a digital experience, right?
Yeah.
So if
That's,
the
yeah.
hiring manager or the recruiter were to record a video saying, hey, this is what it's all about,
Oh
rather
yeah.
than
The
just,
video tools,
yeah,
providing the video tools, a prep before they do the interview, whether it was in person or a video interview, prepping them ahead of time. The more of that stuff that's done, like a video prep, providing the agenda, who am I going to meet with, and who am I going to be interviewed by, giving me some background. The more that's done at any stage that we find, especially the interview stage and the offer on board, that's done, the higher the positive sentiment goes. It's just
it makes sense. You're walking the walk, right? I mean,
every single
if you're going to
time.
require the candidate to record a video interview, why not put your stuff out there
Yeah,
too?
and most of the providers that companies are using, to the platforms that are out there today, they have their own tutorial preps for candidates, just for the system wide, like how this is how you prepare and the lighting. I mean, one of the things we found the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, right, of being in this, for a lot of us who don't have to be on site anywhere, there's little things that we've learned. Like, if you have way too much light behind you, I will never see your face.
Right.
Right.
Never have your back to the window.
That's a little thing, but it happens. How many calls I know I've been on where, and if usually we're not recording the video, but if we were doing like a panel discussion, I've got to have somebody who adjust because you can't see them. But those are little things that help, because you want to be able to see each other. And another thing too, and I mean, these aren't even tips that we write about in the research, but it's when it comes to video interviewing, we're not looking at each other in the eye. I'm looking at the camera, which
Right.
looks like I'm looking at you in the eye, but I'm not looking at you right now. Now I'm looking at you.
Right.
And I'm looking down, right?
Exactly.
So that's hard. That's different than if I was in an in-person interview where whether it's one person or multiple people on a panel, where I can engage each person. This is harder. There's been a level of disruption that can be disconcerting for candidates as well as those who are interviewing, the hiring managers themselves, the recruiters. But yes, the more prep that's done, though, the more positive sentiment we see in the data. Yes.
So what are some of the biggest things, or what is the biggest thing that a company can do to increase their candidate experience and have an immediate improvement? What one thing should they be doing?
Disposition, i.e. reject candidates that are not qualified within 1 to 2 weeks after they apply.
Don't string them along.
Well, and don't hold on to, so that's, there's sometimes you've got companies that will wait until they fill the rec and then disposition everybody.
Yeah.
But that could be,
don't disposition anybody.
well, that could be weeks later, right? And I know that
Yeah.
everybody's like, well, maybe maybe I want to hold on because then I might have to go. My feeling, and I don't say this to disparage anybody, and I try to make it a little funny, but it's true. If out of the gate, whether you're auto screening or a recruiter is looking at people and the resumes, whatever they applied with, their LinkedIn profile, and they're not qualified, you've determined that they are not qualified enough to be screened further. They're not going to magically change in a week, a week later, 2 weeks later. Just let them know. Thank you for your time. Don't do it too soon. Don't do it an hour after they apply. And most companies can set, the dials on their ATS is 24-hour delay, 48-hour delay. But with, in that time frame, we also, the trend we see companies doing it within 3 to 5 days, but 1 to 2 weeks. That's a good disposition them, let them know, thank them for their time. That is this is an uphill battle for companies of any hiring volume and scale, because that is always the biggest volume of people. And even with applications being down, and we're talking 10, 20, 30+% that we're hearing across many companies, fewer people applying, not for every company and industry, but most of them that we're talking to. The most of those people, that's a very limited, narrow experience for most candidates who are only going to be job applicants and finish the application, and that's as far as they're ever going to go. But you serve yourself and them better if you disposition them more quickly. 50 to 60% of the candidates in our data and our research are those who only make it to the application stage.
I think a lot of it stems from a fear of loss. They think that these companies think that, hey, if I dispo this candidate as not qualified or I reject them in some way, then I'm never going to be able to reapproach this candidate in the future. And that's just not the case.
No, it's
Right?
not. In
If
fact,
you reject a candidate, literally, if you have another open job or if your gold star candidate falls out, there's no reason. If you had a good candidate experience up until that point, if you kept the lines of communication open, just because you reject them or decline them,
yeah,
doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to bring them back into your system.
and well, that's our whole point about a better quality candidate experience. And there might be, I mean, if you think about more high volume hiring and hourly employees across different industries, they're more likely. There's a lot of people who are applying for multiple jobs, even at the same company. And people who are serial appliers aside, because there are those people who just apply and they're never going to be qualified for anything. Right. But for most people who feel like they've got something maybe that an employer might see that could work for the employer, they may have applied for multiple jobs too. But again, it's the timeliness factor, because letting them know now, because no matter what happens in our data every year, whether you have the best candidate experience across every single stage and your timely communication, the point when you tell somebody you're not going to pursue them any further, it always goes south. That always skews negative, because nobody wants to be told that.
Yeah.
And
nobody likes being rejected.
But the greater investment that's made in the candidate and the candidate in you, and I'm talking now people who do get screened and assessed and interviewed, that could have even a more visceral impact, positive or negative, because there's a greater level of investment at that point.
So you're seeing a little bit of a skew towards a positive experience the further they go down, if they've had a good experience.
Well, not always positive, but what I mean is that their willingness to do stuff again with the company contingent on what the investment that they've made at those stages and how they feel how their perception of fairness is, which is a critical part of this, which is subjective. But do they feel it was positive and fair? Because of the investment that they've made, they're definitely more likely to do stuff again. If I researched a company, I mean, it varies on time, but if I spent, less than an hour and applied for a job and got rejected, that's not good if I feel like I was qualified, but it's not the same level of investment as somebody who's now getting engagement and human interaction.
Right.
And the time that's invested from the candidate as well as the employer, it's important that those people are especially dispositioned in a timely fashion with more human interaction than even at the point of application. But it can still skew either way. We see it right now, the past 2 years, one of the biggest, there's two different kinds of disruption that we see. We see transitory disruption and systemic. Systemic is more of the ongoing issues that are in your processes, your maybe rogue hiring managers that aren't adhering to structured interviews, things that you just never fixed, like an application that is asking people to put in 15 fields of redundant information that you get in one field. Right. Taking too long, whatever. There's things that could have been ongoing, and then transitory, which is pandemic related, having to virtualize everything and the disruption that came with that, again, based on all the things that we're talking about. But those are things that, organizations at the end of the day, job candidates, Jeff, don't care about your people, your processes, or your technologies. They could care less. All they care about is getting hired. And most of them don't. And everything that I just said, your people, your process, and your technologies drive are extremely critical for candidate experience, even though the candidates don't care. But that is it. That's the journey. Technology is a big part of it today too, especially and even more pervasive into the screening and interviewing.
Yeah. So what are the biggest bottlenecks that you're seeing? Is it more technology related? Is it more human interaction related? Is it on the recruiter side, the hiring manager side? Not trying to throw anybody under the bus
No,
here.
no. I mean, it's all the it's more about it's time. It's about timely response. So it is both people and technology, but people run the technology. That
Yeah.
we're not even with conversational AI. There are no sentient beings that are AI driven right now that can just do their own thing. We're the humans. We control the dials. That's it, period. We do. And so the bottlenecks are more about our not responding in a consistent, timely fashion. And again, and between stages. So it's not just about what happens at the point of application, which is mostly automated for companies of any hiring volume, but then you get to people who are getting screened and assessed and the time that goes by between those steps and the next time we actually when I schedule the interview, and it gets more disrupted if those interviews are getting rescheduled by the recruiters or the hiring managers. So it's really human, it's fallible human issues that come up that are really, I would argue, at the end of the day, the bottlenecks. It's not the technology's fault. The technology is supposed to help things make more efficient, but if you're not working on efficiency, they won't do it.
Right. So it seems like 2021 is kind of the year of candidates and recruiters ghosting each other. What can be done, do you think, either from an internal process or from a technology to stop all this ghosting?
Damn, if I knew that answer,
I'm hoping
I
somebody
would
can
be,
answer.
well, I think the way that I mean, I don't really have an answer. I know that historically candidates have always hate the fact that when they don't hear back, and let me, there's so many different little nuances to this though. Keep in mind that every year email deliverability gets harder and harder. Spam filters are companies and their security, everything's ratcheted up. Then you combine not only our Can Spam Act, but with then combine GDPR and privacy issues, and it's getting harder and harder. So it's, people might not even be seeing those emails that they're getting in the first place when it
Yeah.
comes to those responses, right? So and that's why we're seeing SMS and texting increase with employers in regards to notifying the candidates at the end of the day. What was your question again, Jeff? I just was going, I was going to start rambling on about something, but I'm like, wait, what did you ask me? That's
how do we stop ghosting?
oh, the ghosting. Wow. See, I ghosted myself. Did you see that? How that worked?
You
I
ghosted
went,
your own answer there.
oh, ghost.
It's been a
Um,
long week.
anyway, my point, it's been a good week, but a long one. I think that the ghosting has something that unfortunately candidates have always experienced from employers, especially those who aren't qualified and never hear back, even if they miss the automated messages. I don't know. I think today you've got we went from, so last year we saw companies that were much more transparent in their communication with candidates and their employees because the world was upside down, and they would like, this is what's happening, we have to virtualize
And
everything, you
from
can't
what I was
start.
saying, candidates were more forgiving
And
too,
they were
right?
more forgiving last year. They in North America, they are not anymore. And I think in EMEA too, not so much in the other two regions, APAC and Latin America, which is a different thing. We can talk about that. But so nobody wants, the people don't want to work the way they used to work anymore. And fear, COVID is one thing, and that's social unrest is another. That's part of this equation that we continue to be, things are not, stability is not there as in social order and structure. But people don't want to work the way that they used to work anymore. They don't want to work for the pay. I mean, if you look at we've seen greater wage increases for low wage workers this year than in the past 10 plus years, because finally, and it's still probably not enough for some of the people who are the lowest income earners, right? They're just not making enough money, and they weren't before.
Right.
in jobs that were, but I think it's a combination of all those things. People again don't want to work that way. If you told me that I could work remote during the pandemic and it still worked and we were productive and we are thriving, why are you making me come back to the office?
I agree. I've
I
been
mean,
remote for 15 years. It's very
although,
difficult for
but
me
that's
to,
easy for us because I have too. I've
yeah,
been remote for 12 years, right?
yeah,
I mean, mostly. And so I know that, but I think that is, and then there's, um, women and people of color, well, they want more equality in the workplace. They want more pay parity. And I mean, and it's not like these things are new. They've been pervasive under the surface for a long time, but this past 2 years has really uncovered a lot of that. So that's what's going to stop candidates from ghosting. I don't know the answer. I actually wish that they wouldn't do that, because I still think at the end of the day, employers still hold all the cards when it comes to whether or not I'm going to hire you. And I would never do that. If I decided I was going to like withdraw even at the last minute on a job that was interested in me, I would tell them.
yeah.
I would be
I
clear
don't
about
think
it
it's
and be
acceptable
definitive.
on either side. And I see,
It's
um,
not, but
obviously it's happening a lot on the candidate side because
it
there are
is a
more
lot more.
candidates
It is.
in the process. However, companies, I think, started that trend, if you will, in not replying in a timely manner to candidates. It completely
Sure.
devalued them as candidates. And they're just like, I don't care. I've applied to 10 other companies. The ones that do reply, I'm going to be, courteous to
Yeah, I
them.
know.
So
I
I don't agree with it, but I get why they're
I hear
doing
you
it.
on that. I
Yeah,
wish more candidates wouldn't do that, but it is what it is right now. And I think
yeah,
again, I go back. People are who have the leverage, because not everybody does have the leverage, but
right.
maybe hourly workers are finding more leverage than what I think a lot of people would have thought, and across various industries. But I think when you do have the leverage, people don't want they want to work a way that's better balanced for them. I think that's what what I'm seeing and hearing more. I want to be paid what I deserve. I want to work flexibility because I have a family. I mean, there's and even when this pandemic, which we hope eventually fades away until the next one, whenever that is, that a lot of these organizations that have taken things seriously, I mean, and also helping to educate their workforce, and like offering, we'll pay for your college, we'll pay for your tuition, we'll pay for you, keep that going and keep the flexibility going and pay people what they are worth and what they deserve. Because the dark sadness on the other side of this is that not all industries, the ones we know that are decimated, but many industries, the profits have soared.
Yeah.
And most people don't see that. Right.
Right.
Only the people who are in charge see that.
I,
And the
I think
shareholders
most
see that.
employees, though, they don't understand that, 1 year, if you have record profits in 1 year, but you give everybody raises, those profits may not be there next year,
Well,
right?
right.
But your salaries don't get reduced,
No, they don't. No,
So
except unless
that's the trouble that companies get into.
it
Now,
is.
there's no
Yeah, it
reason why
is.
they can't give a one-time bonus or something like that and
But
get
I'm
some profit sharing back.
but I'm
But
talking about some companies though that we're talking,
oh, billions and billions.
billions and trillions, not a small company that may have
Exactly.
a few tens of thousands that may get burned the next year because it's a bad economy. I'm not
Exactly.
talking about those. I'm talking about the big multinational
Right.
companies that have, war chests of money. But I mean, unfortunately though, you're right about that. But we've already heard, and not recently, but companies that were actually starting to tinker with, we're going to pay you less because you are going to be remote, because you're
Oh
not
yeah.
going to work, you're not coming to the office, and you're
I've
not.
seen several companies give
I
13 to
mean, and
15%
I'm like, really?
reductions.
So well, anyway, and I don't want to make this about, David and Goliath or us against them, but I do think that the organizations, big and small across industries, are having to figure out how they need to better manage and how they need to better recruit and hire, and what do they need to do, and there are companies that are doing it. It's, beyond candidate and employee experience. that they are trying to make a difference. And it's, we've already seen, I mean, there's enough data out there now, and I just read another piece on this recently too, that the government benefits that were offered and was not what was preventing people from going back to work.
No, I know a lot
It
of
wasn't. It was maybe some, but not really, though. And there's enough data now that shows that that's not the case, because now those benefits are gone and people aren't going back to work.
But that was a good talking point.
Well, of course it was.
Yeah, it was a good way to throw, a certain segment of population.
I know, I get it too, but
I never believed it. I always thought that was bunk. People weren't going back to work because there weren't the jobs there to support it. Now that there are the jobs there, they may not have the ability to go back to work. But by and large, most people like working. Most people want to go back to work. They just want to get paid what they're worth.
Oh, I agreed. And I think that's what we all want. And I hope that we'll see more of the evolving as a society, and the workplace, the employer-employee exchange becomes more equitable over time. So
in the 2020 report, there was not you, because I'm sure you didn't write it, but nearly 35% of North American candidates said they wanted career sites in multiple languages. 32% they wanted even more information about culture of the company they were applying to. And nearly 32% wanted more information on why employees want to work for that employer and why they want to stay.
Yep.
What were some of that's my big takeaway from the 2020 report. What is some of the data showing for 2021?
Very similar. I mean, it's very similar. That's what they want to hear more about. They really want to know, what is it really like to work there?
Right.
And
why should I leave where I'm at to come work
there? And down to, I mean, and they want to know more. They also even more so now about the diversity and inclusion initiatives that your company may have in place, and community and sustainability initiatives. They want to know what career path opportunities are, even for people who are hourly employees across industries. They want more of that kind of content. That's the stuff they want to see. Salary and benefits, yes, are important. And that's not going to go away, but it's not just about that. I mean, there are those people who need a job, right? And that's what they're looking for, and they'll go to the job. But they want to understand more about what it is really like to work there. And so a lot of that data, those data points can fluctuate year after year, but those are still top of mind things for candidates, though. And that's not.
You mentioned D&I right there, diversity and inclusion, military also included in that. Too often, I've been in this industry for 25 years. The diversity, inclusion, and military has been pretty much a checkbox. As long as we're posting our jobs on some diversity sites and inclusion sites, we're covered, right?
Yeah.
What other initiatives are companies really, pushing out there besides checking that box?
Well, I mean, those are the initiatives, though. I mean, if you want to talk about making a more inclusive work environment, whether you're on site somewhere in an office, in a plant, in a store, or you're working remotely for an organization, and how do you feel that you belong in the organization? Companies that have those themes, I think, are resonating. And I mean, but, at the end of the day, though, remember a few years ago, when the insiders at Amazon were sharing how toxic the work environment was, whether you're on the corporate level or even the warehouses, and they were deemed as the evil. There's still people who want to work for Amazon. At the end of the day, we still choose even knowing what we know about where we want to be and work and the brands we want to associate with. So, but I feel, and I'm saying this from my own personal vantage point too, I want to be at a place where I feel I belong.
Yeah, I was speaking with Leah Daniels the other day. She's formerly over at Appcast, and now she's over somewhere else, which I won't mention the name. But and she had mentioned something that kind of rung a bell with me, where female candidates were 50% more likely to accept a position from a company or a job offer if they had a woman on the interview panel, right? So if they were
I've
being
seen data
interviewed
like
by,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
if they're being interviewed by a woman, not just an all male panel, but
Yeah.
at least one woman, they were 50% more likely to accept a role. I was going to, are you seeing additional data like that for
I
candidate
don't,
experience?
we don't, I mean, it's not something that I'm studying every day, but
Yeah.
I have seen related research. I believe, interestingly enough, believe it or not, in the past 2 years, um, we have different demographic cuts of the data that we can do too. And females have told us in our data and research across job types that they have a more positive candidate experience than men the past 2 years.
Hmm.
Now that doesn't mean that they got, most of the candidates in our data don't get hired, right?
Yeah.
But and there's so much going on underneath that I'm not even talking about. But just looking at some of the key indicators that we look at, this is the first time that we've seen more of a separation. Usually it was really mostly even Steven between men and women. We did add non-binary this year, which is it's a small segment. And we did also start asking for race and ethnicity too. But for females, they've tell us that they've had a more positive candidate experience than men the past 2 years, which is a little counterintuitive based on what's happened in the world. But that's what they're telling us in our data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got to trust the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the episode, you kind of teased out, everybody wants to know what's kind of new. So do you have any new insights?
Well, I first say it this way because there are there are clear competitive differentiators we see every year in our data. And with every time when somebody asks that, this year I've kind of been joking with some of the candy companies that participated and saying I feel like a grumpy old man because I'm like, nothing's different. Nothing's different. Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn because
Nothing's changed.
because communication and now just the big picture competitive differentiators, communication and feedback, no matter what the world looks like, no matter what your people and process and technologies look like, those are the things that make a difference in candidate experience. Consistent and timely communication and feedback loops every single year. Now, what's different, that's like every year the same. What's different though is that unfortunately what we saw last year happening when candidates were more forgiving and companies were more empathetic, that, and it's not to say companies still aren't trying to be better communicators, resentment, especially in North America, has gone back up to pre-COVID levels. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is the candidates who tell us in the data and the research based on certain ratings that we ask, that one of the ratings is when they have a very truly negative experience, they're not willing to ever do anything again with that employer. They say, and not everybody puts their money where their mouth is, but we know a good percentage of them. We all have our own visceral, I'm sure you do too, Jeff, of candidate experience stories that were super negative and we're like, I will never do anything with that company again. And
absolutely.
And that happens to many of us. And so the percentage of people who feel that way in our data has gone back up again. In North America, it's gone back up again in EMEA, not in APAC and Latin America, though. And usually those skew more positive anyway, because what we know, we don't measure this, but we know anecdotally, and the employers we work with over the years and just talking, those regions are also big and broad regions too, but those candidates are less likely to share negative feedback in the Pacific Rim and APAC countries, as well as in Latin America, compared to North America and EMEA. And when I say North America and who are the most vocal and sometimes angriest candidates in North America, because for us, North America is Canada, the US, and Mexico. It's the US.
Not Canada?
Of course not. No, not Canada.
Exactly.
No, more nice, more nice. And I would argue candidates for Mexico are lean more to the sides of feeling less likely to be negative, like in Latin America. But in the US of A, maybe we're just super like vocal. But that's the unfortunate thing that we've seen. And it's pre 2019 and this year are the highest levels through all the years that we've measured this, that we've ever seen what we call candidate resentment. So that's kind of a bummer that that's back up. We've also, and believe it or not, the past 2 years, and this year is no exception, the hourly positive sentiment for hourly workers has remained much higher than what we would have thought.
Really?
Yeah, because that I'm being totally serious, and much higher than what I thought. Yeah, and across different stages, it's just much higher than what we would have thought. One thing that does hold true though, and we're seeing it again this year too, is that when you go from entry level and then hourly employees to professional hires to management to senior leadership, candidate experience degrades as the level of experience goes up, and there's more hoops to jump through when you've been in the workforce for a while and you're in certain levels of positions. But that always has been the case too. What else has been? That's some of the biggest things that we've seen so far. I mean, a lot of the things that you read in last year's report we'll be updating for this year. There's probably not a lot of variance, other than there's been a lot more virtual interviewing and onboarding that have gone on. That's been extremely real. And just like with the interview process that we talked about, and this holds true for onboarding, more that happens prior to day one for a new hire, the higher positive sentiment. And also a retention starter out of the gate too. And that means, besides the pesky paperwork, getting that out of the way, introducing them to the team members they're going to meet, even if this is all virtual, introducing the company culture, what's coming in their first, few weeks, if not first 30 days. I mean, the more prep that's done for a new hire, the more positive they feel about it. And that holds true again this year too.
I think hiring managers definitely have to be a little bit more cognizant about how much time they spend with their team, especially new, people are onboarding, and before they might be able to just, spend an hour or two the first week or two and then pass the rest off to the team.
Right.
I don't think that's the case anymore. I think because of the virtual, they need to be more connected and not less connected.
Agreed. Yeah. Health industries like healthcare and finance and insurance got hammered in the ratings this year in the Cande. So as an industry, when you partition that group, the ratings went really low and negative.
Yeah, well,
and something for healthcare, we understand why. And I'm talking to healthcare organizations, besides what they've had to deal with the past 2 years, they are also super struggling to retain staff, positions, nursing, other positions as well. I wouldn't even want to work in that field. Blessings to them all, because that's super tough. But so there have been industries that have been hit hard, even that they fared okay fiscally and as a fiscally sound okay in the past 2 years, they still got hammered in. So these are all things that we're kind of like slicing and dicing and starting to write up for this year's research too. So again, not joking, it's a lot of the same differentiators every year, but we are seeing, unfortunately, this slide back to higher resentment in the data.
Well, I can't wait to read the 2021
Yeah, I appreciate
report.
it. We're excited about it too. Yeah.
Yep. Any parting thoughts here? When does the report come out? End of the year, right?
It'll be end of the year, early next. I mean, for sure, that's our goal right now, especially the bigger report, which is the North American one. And then the smaller regions will have briefs that will come out for those. But end of the year, early next is what we're looking at right now. And then the program opens up for 2022 at the end of January, and companies can start participating again for next year's benchmark then.
Perfect. And I'll put links to where they can sign up. Send me those links. I'll put them in the description.
Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely.
All right. This way we can drive some the more people that participate, the better your data is.
Well,
right?
I think, yeah. And we just get a greater distribution across industries for companies from a benchmark perspective, but not, this year we're up in participation from last year, but as you can imagine, the past 2 years are definitely down from pre-COVID because, companies,
more important things.
Well, I mean, I would argue that it's still important, but then again, who wants to, when you're trying to keep the business alive, who wants to survey anybody?
Exactly.
Right now. So I get all that. And we hope that, in years to come, we'll start picking up again. So,
yep. I mean, I think in 2020, there was definitely a level of survey fatigue, right? So,
well, I think there's a lot and I think this year we've hit a lot of fatigue, period, across the board, virtual fatigue, survey fatigue, just fatigue. And I think that's part of what we were talking about at the earlier theme, Jeff, about people who are also done. They're checked out. They're done. I mean, it's there's been a lot of, mental health issues have been on the rise too, sadly, over the past year and a half, but people are also done. They're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it this way anymore. I don't. And that's what we're seeing.
Well, hopefully we have a big sunset or a sunrise on the horizon. Right?
I hear you. I know.
Keep driving, everybody. Keep driving.
Right. Exactly.
Better times ahead. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the.
Oh yeah, Jeff. Thank you. Experience. I enjoyed.
And I will be sure to put all those links down the bottom, everybody. If you want to hit up Kevin, you want to give some contact information at all, or
just find me on LinkedIn, Kevin W. Grossman, and look me up on LinkedIn and connect. Yeah.
Yep. All right, everybody, make it a great one. Kevin, thank you so much again.
You got it. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Bye.